Ethiopia has been one of the few success stories in Africa over the past few years. In the last 4 years, the East African country and second most populous in Africa has recorded a consistent growth rate of 9.3%. The country is currently constructing the largest power plant in Africa that is expected to further drive economic developments there. Speaking on the sidelines of the Wharton Club of Africa Investment and CEO Summit in Lagos, Nigeria, Managing Partner Transaction Advisory Services of Ernst & Young, Zemedene Nagatu, says there can't be any better time to invest in the country than now.
Sure. There are 3 or 4 key sectors for investors, for global investors, and also investors from Africa to look at Ethiopia. One is manufacturing, especially labor-intensive manufacturing that could benefit from 2 things. Very cheap electricity. Ethiopia has the cheapest per kilowatt electricity cost of any country in the world, which is 4 US cents. The second part of it is affordable labor. So if you look at, for example, how China developed over the last 30 years, it was on the back of a very large productive labor force, which is now becoming affluent, which is becoming more and more expensive. So labor costs in China, for example, are becoming very high, whereas by contrast in Ethiopia, it's still about 20 to 30% of what it costs in China. So when you combine those two, and of course, the infrastructural support that is being built, the roads, the power dams, as you know, Ethiopia is building the largest. Any industry that can take advantage of these elements, I think there should be. So manufacturing will be one of them. The second is, of course, agro-industry, especially value-added agro-industry. Not necessarily the farming, but the raw material that comes from the farm. It could be value-added coffee being exported to whether it's China, to Europe, other things, but anything related to agro-industry, because as you know, Ethiopia has a lot of fertile land. It's a very large country. That, I think, will be. The third part of it is investments in infrastructure. It could be ownership of some of these infrastructural assets, but also primarily, as the Chinese are doing, for example, coming in and helping build the huge infrastructural needs of Ethiopia. Now, these are sort of the 3 key sectors. In addition to that, of course, from a domestic perspective, but also from investors' perspective, is the tourism sector, untapped. We, for example, have the largest airline in Africa. It flies to China, it flies to all around the world. Last year, it made more money than all African airlines combined. That means it has built up huge capacity. On the back of that, you can build a very large tourism sector, not just Ethiopia-centric, but focused on the region as well. So if you segment it from manufacturing, agro-industry, infrastructure, tourism, and then of course, not last but not least, is the resource play. I know at the moment commodity prices around the world have come down, but Ethiopia also has huge untapped natural resources. So when you combine all this, because a lot of people ask me, how was it Ethiopia was able to grow by 10.4% on average for 10 years in a row? Okay, these are some of the elements that has helped propel it. Huge investments in infrastructure, which is now going to start paying dividends to the private sector, both the domestic private sector and the foreign private sector, which needs electricity, which needs roads, the railways. Again, here the Chinese have played a very, very significant role. For example, they're helping rebuild the railway connection between Ethiopia and the port in Djibouti. And I was very happy to say that a month ago, I attended the inauguration of the first subway in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, built by the Chinese, but of course paid by the Ethiopians. So when you combine all these, when it's coming online, the hydroelectric, all these coming together is starting to attract very large investors from emerging economies like China, Turkey, but also from the Americans. If you saw that the headline that we saw a few months ago, that the big American private equity firm, KKR, made its first investment in Africa, in Ethiopia. These are indications that there's something really solid and substantial going on in Ethiopia. Remember, 30 years ago, we epitomized the depth of desperation in Africa and more so in Ethiopia, when millions of Ethiopians, hundreds of thousands died of famine. To have come from that to be the 4th largest economy in Africa today, and by our calculation, if oil prices stay where they are today, at this time next year, by 2016, Ethiopia will become the 3rd largest economy, because the difference between the 3rd and 4th, which is Angola and Ethiopia, is very small. If Ethiopia grows at 10.4, Angola, because of oil prices coming down, it will be the 3rd biggest economy in Africa. So you need to look at it in totality, that is what Ethiopia has been delivering. I'm not going to suggest that everything is going to be smooth, everything going to be easy. It's an early stage emerging economy. But for those who plan carefully, who know what they're doing, and pick the right sectors, aligning their strategies with the state's strategy, with the country's strategy, I think there's a lot of opportunity.